Damas y caballeros, welcome everybody to the BarCODE Collective. As usual, you guys know how it goes down with us. This is Cutthroat checking in, accompanied by my man over here. We got Antonio, we have Ant Woods, we have Jacob, and we have our guest, Cidney Corpuz. How you doing, brother?
Good, thank you.
Well, we're really happy to have you right now. You know, we're going to start off with our usual routine. We're going to go into some check-ins, so I'll check in first. What's going on? It's Cutthroat, man. I'm checking in with a lot of peace right now and a lot of harmony and a lot of synergetic feel. Life's definitely been unexpectedly beautiful, and I've learned to let go of a lot of things, and you know what, that's just brought a lot of good flow in my life, and I've been receiving a lot of abundance, so I'm very grateful and very thankful for that. So moving on forward to the week, I'm just going to kind of continue to go with that. Now check in with the one, man. So that's me.
Oh, beautiful. Myself, man, same story, man. Really big decisions on my plate right now, weighing pretty heavy. However, I did make a decision as of this morning, which is major. A little too early to dive into it, and this is part of the lessons that I've learned in the past, kind of not vocalizing too much because shit can always take a little side turn, right? So honestly, time will tell whether this is good or bad, and largely we get to define what that looks like, and we don't know whether these decisions are good or bad until we're laying on that fucking deathbed, right? So we're waiting to see if this actual thing sticks, and I would love to fill all you guys in the next couple weeks. But as of right now, I'm checking in with a solid 2. Nothing too pressing. So that's for me. What about you, Ant Woods?
Ooh, give me a second. I always like to sit for a second and
Get the primer in.
yeah, I like to. My mind's always running. So I gotta like intentionally kind of settle it down. But checking in with a ton of excitement. Honestly, I was training right before I got here. I lost track of time. I was afraid I'd be late, and I wasn't. So I'm happy that I wasn't, and so I'm still on 10 for making sure that I made a commitment to be here with you guys, and I take that commitment seriously. And I lost track of time, and I was really, really, really upset at myself for that. And I made it here, so I'm super excited for that. And also, I've been intentionally leaning into a ton of discomfort, and it's been paying off in some ways that I wasn't necessarily prepared to expect. So a lot of my internal confidence has been rated in pretty high. Excuse me. So yeah, I'm checking in with a ton of excitement. I'm grateful to be with you guys, and I'm about a 5 in a very positive way. About a 5.
I want to just say I'm really proud of you for not checking in with anxiety today.
Hey,
That's the first time we've had check-ins that I have yet to hear you say, I'm checking in with a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah. Usually it's
That's
there.
dope. That's dope, dude.
Not
That's
today.
a fucking big step.
Not today.
Man.
It was there about 10 minutes ago on the highway. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Tori for getting us here safely. She turned into Dominic Toretto on the one. Well, we're here.
Oh,
Straight up. Yeah, she's got an S5 and a lead foot.
More like Ludacris.
Straight up. Yeah. So grateful. I'm happy. Yeah, straight up. Happy to be here.
Right on. Well, checking in with fear, with an underline of fear. Big weekend coming up for me. I shared some of that on our last podcast. So definitely some fear around that. Also some guilt associated with that for the people who are gonna witness me walking into this experience and experiencing themselves a fear around that, what that's going to look like, what is going to be the Antonio it's going to come out of the other side of this weekend. So some guilt around that. And also there was some excitement, and I'm struggling with letting go the attachment to the outcome, and hopefully I will be able to get there within the next few days. But definitely struggling with that right now. So yeah, with that I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, that guilt that you carry with it, you might come out this better version of yourself, right? So like with that guilt of like changing, that's the intention, right? The goal is to change through this, and hopefully confidently, like what to do with the lessons that you're going to get, and whether it's a very hard journey for you or a smooth one, I think you're gonna put together something great, from that lesson, man.
And I can tell you from my experiences, because what we shared and what I've done, obviously, and with the journey you're about to take, I understand that feeling of like the guilt and the fear and the trying to let go. All I can do to help you from my personal experience is as soon as it does go underway, you instantly let go. So walk in with confidence knowing that once it starts, you just instinctively let go. So it's going to be okay.
No, and again, the fear is not so much around that, of the process itself. It's what's going to be after. Afterwards. So that's what the fear is around. Okay. Not so much around the process.
Yeah.
What that looks like, I don't know. So I don't have much expectations around that.
Yeah.
But I do fear what's the version of me that's going to come out of that.
Well, I'm
and how
excited to meet
him. Thank you. And that's how it's not going to impact the people around me, especially my family, my immediate family, my wife, and my 2 daughters.
Yeah. All right, Cidney. So just real quick before we dive into who you are and your story, why don't you give us a little check-in, man? How you feeling right now?
So 5 is the best.
5 is like shit's heavy right now. I need to get some shit off my chest.
I would definitely say I'm right in the middle, like a 2.5. I can definitely say I'm not at the 1 or the 5, but I believe that it can be easy to drop if I'm not conscious about managing headspace. I'm in a big transition place right now where my studio just closed, and I'm trying to figure it out. But I also feel like, is this the cast of the next John Wick? Like, there's no pencils here, I guess. I already feel like this is a very good brotherhood and community.
Thank you.
So I'm very grateful to be here.
Awesome, man.
We're happy to have you, man.
Yeah, very stoked to have you. And, as you mentioned, you're going through a lot. And that's why I really wanted to have you on here to share part of that story. I've been blessed to have you in my life for the past few years and, witness and share a very similar process over this past year and a half going through COVID, taking a huge leap of faith with a new project and believing so much in what we're trying to do and in our own capacity and our own work ethic to have a lot of that pulled out from beneath us, not necessarily because of anything that we did. And that was super hard for me.
Right.
And we shared that as well in where it's like, man, we can show up and we can grind, but our hands are a little cuffed here, right? So, when I first met you was probably 6 years ago. I was overseeing and operating the Anytime Fitness over here in Seal Beach. And, seeing you come in, had a little swagger to you. We chatted a little bit back and forth there, kind of connected on some of the on it stuff and kettlebells and just seeing that. And, that's where you first came into my life. And, one of the most impactful moments in my life thus far, this fork in the road, this decision that I was making with leaving an old relationship, a marriage, and kind of stepping into this unknown territory. I remember just reaching out to you and you meeting me for coffee over on 2nd Street in Belmont Shore and just being there for me, and not having too many friends down here like that. That sticks out to me, and I'll never forget it. You came with a little gift of Palo Santo, and, it's just something that sticks with me forever, and I really appreciate you.
To cry on this thing?
I mean,
Oh yeah.
But when you do, take a look at that camera. Get that right down here.
Straight in.
So all that you've been going through and all that you've been through, you still managed to show up for those people that might not even be the closest to you in your realm, and hats off to you. Appreciate you because it doesn't go unseen and it doesn't go unappreciated. So. With that being said, man, tell us a little bit about your journey, your story. Where'd you come from? What were you up to when I first met you before, and kind of where you're at now?
Wow, this you could totally just leverage this into like multiple book deals. Like each of us have a book under the Jacob Media Group.
I mean, I think we all kind of look at this whole journey of life as if we're writing our damn books. That's why we're not getting so stuck on the moment that we're in. That's just a chapter. We can turn that page and we can start writing that next. I'm just gonna stop this chapter right here, fucking mid-sentence, jumping over to chapter fucking 14 right now.
I guess maybe a good place to start is when I met you, or became aware of your presence. So At the time, 2012 to 2017, I was teaching at Purple Yoga, which is down the street from an Anytime Fitness. And part of my day, besides teaching, was to just do some treadmill work at the Anytime Fitness. And at that time, you just moved into town. If you guys do not know, Jacob had a massive mane of hair.
Lots.
No way.
Yeah.
All right.
True.
And every time I was there training, and I say training loosely, I was walking on a treadmill.
He insisted on coming and running his fingers through my hair.
No, I didn't do that. Well, I mean, the thing that was interesting to me was like every time I trained and any time I saw you, you were always cleaning. And you weren't just cleaning, that you were also doing the hard work. Like you were sweeping, you were vacuuming, you were cleaning bathrooms, you were picking up the dirty towels. And as a martial artist, we know that it's not just white belts that clean the floor. Like everybody cleans the floor. So I immediately was like, okay, this guy's serious. And I think from there, besides the personal, you were also in a place entrepreneur-wise where it's like, what is your next move? I mean, I think you spent 2 years looking for a location, right?
Yeah.
And we had many, many conversations on that as well, you know. I mean, I think there was some heavy stuff personally, but also what I guess compounded that was the feeling of where am I gonna start this thing, you know, professionally, you know. And that's when I met Jacob, and part of my training as a yoga teacher and uniqueness as a brand was I trained with Onnit Academy in Austin, and I think that was something that was authentic to me, training with kettlebells and maces, unconventional movement. And I think, I mean, audience can say what they want to say about Joe in the present, but for me at the time, Joe was a big driver of where I'm at now.
That's Joe Rogan, if y'all not familiar.
Yes.
But if you listen to this podcast, hopefully you're familiar.
Check them out.
Yeah, so I think that's when we just like connected, like, oh, wow, you can curate the people around you, especially people that are on the same hustle at different levels, you know. That's when I really saw myself, oh, you don't just curate your friends, but you almost curate this like mind of people that are not necessarily at the highest level, that are all in different planes.
But real still recognizes real kind of
Real
thing.
recognize real, and then, you know, look, I think all of us can say that we will be there for each other when we need help, but also, man, is it so nice to just see somebody on your team winning?
Oh, fuck yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think professionally or financially, we have demands that we can do better, because we also know that ultimately financial success might mean freedom of time, personal time, right? But I guess my journey right now is trying to figure out, am I too fixated on growing the business? And do I have to almost back out of my expectations to actually enjoy the journey of this? You know, 10 years as a yoga teacher, and then, you know, 4 years as a studio owner. And I'm back to being a white belt. I'm teaching yoga for somebody that's not my studio anymore. Is that too long?
Not at all. I mean,
I can imagine that's probably one hell of a humbling experience too.
It's very humbling. It's very humbling because I am at that age where I have people in my peer group that are retiring now. I have people in my peer group that are on their second or third entrepreneurial venture. But that's when I have to catch myself and say, support them, be there for them, but that's not my journey, and I can't, I guess, attach myself to that, and then create that false expectation, because it's not going to be good for my mental state.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so I am very much on this martial arts journey of coming back to being a student, having student mind. Albino and Preto and Shoyuro are very generous with helping me with gear and kimonos, but recently I bought a kimono from Albino and Preto specifically for when I just practice yoga, and I also bought a white belt because I almost need something to help me understand that it's okay to be a student. And ultimately, I'm hoping that it serves the greater good, you know?
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned, which I think we could probably all relate to is, although we have this understanding that, like, for this complete life of having it all, we need to fill multiple cups. We need to focus on multiple pillars. And, you mentioned, am I fixating too much on the business? For me, as of right now, like, I resonate with that so much. But what I've been doing in an attempt to write a little bit of a different story is, like, what is the fucking business? I'm the business. You know what I mean? But in my mind, I'm looking at this external thing, be it the fit bar, being this property, being it space bar, whatever it is, as the business, when that's just, like we talked about, a chapter in the book. I'm the business. If I'm not fixating some of that energy and time on me and what I need, none of those other things as branches of this tree trunk over here are ever going to grow. And, like, that's the hardest thing to do. So, in trying to detach yourself from the studio, what are some of the practices or things that you're doing to move forward? One, I guess, buying the white belt, trying to take on that student mind again. What else? What other practices are you focusing on?
So when I opened my first studio, I was in a relationship that I believed in so hard, and maybe that was also false expectation on my end, that I opened this studio in order to demonstrate my seriousness in the relationship. But within 1 month, it fell apart, the relationship. So I hit depression. I was crying all the time in Target, getting gas in front of my students. And for those of you guys that don't know me, that is something that is uncharacteristic for me. I lead extremely demanding and powerful classes. And I believe that I am the one that changed yoga 10 years ago, because I incorporated martial arts to it, or martial arts mindset. So students were seeing me broken for the first time, and it was amplified because I saw them see me like that. So I had to make a very conscious decision to engage in therapy. And that might be something very hard for males or warrior class types of students to engage in. But I think going through that therapy set me up to be able to cope and to manage dark places, or being aware of moving towards dark places.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, currently right now I have one talk trauma therapist. She's unique because her office is on a farm in Fallbrook. So once I get there, there's very low cell signal there. It's in the middle of nowhere. And for 1 hour, we walk around the farm. We pick up eggs, we grab vegetables and stuff like that. Walk around in the dirt.
You're grounding.
Grounding, right? Yeah, I think even there's another term called earthing.
Yeah.
You know, and then the second hour is we're in the office, and that's where it can kind of get heavy because we're talking it out. And then after that, she sends me home with eggs.
That's with your eggs, with a basket full of
vegetables,
goodies.
and it's like, oh wow, this is like not from a store. Like this came from her earth.
Not just that, you yourself handpicked and pulled it.
For sure,
This is
for sure. Yeah. And then there's a massage therapist. There's 2 physical therapists, and then there's our mutual dear brother Matt Rice, who is functioning as personal training. I also think part of managing moving through dark places or moving towards it, and I can identify with anxiety, especially when you have massive vision. I think training with Matt, and one of these days maybe you guys will have Matt on or discuss with Matt, but training with Matt and surrendering myself to like, look, I could train by myself, but it's nice to have another voice lead. I don't know, man, it helps with my dignity as a man. Yeah. You know, and I think that's the big thing Matt's helping me with right now is to not necessarily, I'm not in a place where I have zero dignity. I believe that it's helping me maintain, you know, to have kettlebells, to pick up weights, to refocus eyes, you know. So talk trauma therapist, physical therapist, personal trainer. And I guess my biggest discovery right now is the Uberman podcast.
Yeah,
and that was through Matt. So I used to teach a lot of 5 and 6 a.m. classes. So my alarm was always going off at 4:30. And even though my studio was closed, I'm still waking up at 4:30. I'm still gassing out at 2 p.m. Because I'm always used to moving through darkness. I commute to and I commute home in the dark. And most of the time I'm in the studio, you know. So I think part of my self-work, and I don't want to make it sound like self-work is almost like work. I am genuinely interested in Uberman, if I'm pronouncing that right, because I think he's really demystifying bro science. I mean, he is really bringing in, you know, are we allowed to cuss? Real shit. Yeah. So, and 2 of the big things that I'm picking off Uberman is it's okay to add behavior tools, right? Modifying behavior, adjusting behavior does not mean you're a weak person or a broken person, but you could experiment with adding behavior tools. So one of the behavior tools I'm exploring is intermittent fasting per him. So as a guy that has a very loose schedule now, because I'm not teaching often, having a schedule where my window is 12 to 8, can I maintain discipline through that, even though I have complete free will to break that and eat, I don't know, a breakfast at 8 a.m., you know? So I think having that behavior tool is helping me. And I think that the second one that is also very interesting to me is managing sunlight. You know, Uberman talks a lot about when you wake up, can you explore getting in sunlight when the sun is low? Because the lights that are coming through, yellows and blues, are helping adjust your body's clock. But if you are getting a lot of bright and artificial light, of course your body clock's gonna be off. So I'm still waking up at 4:30, but I am definitely conscious now of when I wake up, can I try to get some sort of natural light when the sun is just coming up and not necessarily at its highest point.
And people don't realize that. Getting a little bit of that natural light. So I'm a barber.
Okay.
But the thing is, I cut hair sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Sun ain't out at that time, man.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there was a point when I was working at a barbershop. Dude, I'd be there, same thing as you. Going on my way to work, sun's not up. On my way to back home, sun's down.
Right.
Like I'm working by a window, but I'm almost being encased.
Yeah.
You know, it's still funky. It's not the same as actually being outside, you know?
Right.
And you don't understand the benefits of actually feeling like that sun, the air, like being outside and what that actually does to you physically.
Right.
It really changes you. You know, and now
Right.
that's something that I've noticed and that I've practiced. I spend a lot of time, I have like a backyard. I work from home now. And I have my own studio at home where I cut hair. And I usually try to make it a practice to, at one point in the day, because, you know, I'm waking up 5 o'clock, first haircut's at 5:30, sometimes 5 or 6, just depends. But nonetheless, you know, I have all these LED lights hitting me. But as soon as I see that sun come up, if I got 10 minutes,
Yeah.
I'm sitting in the backyard. I'm
Yeah.
chilling, I'm hanging out, I'm feeling that. And
Right.
it changes the whole perspective of my entire day.
Right, and I think by having students that are working a lot remotely and them allowing me to spend time with them when they're working or observe them, I am definitely seeing that it's important during your workflow, whether it is remote or in office, that it's not just work, but there's a schedule of a workflow. Like I have a friend named Kevin who was the consigliere for Hawt.
That's a big word. I'm
Yeah.
gonna need you to define that.
Consigliere is basically a top advisor.
Okay. Okay.
Consigliere.
And he has timers that go off every 30 minutes where he's reminded to stand up. And then after every Zoom meeting, he just walks around the block. So I think awareness to not just work, but your workflow in relation to your wellness is extremely important, you know?
Yeah, and like with that same kind of train of thought, another reason that helps me when I think of stuff like that is in thinking about these things reminds me that I'm just a motherfucking animal like everybody else, right? And it's like the further we get away from that, these other things compound and we become disconnected. And that's why walking on the farm picking eggs is like, oh shit, I'm connected to something more here. Right. And by bringing in these behavior change practices, bringing in back to more of this natural state and letting things work the way they're supposed to work, you know, and that's why, you know, you're ultimately getting the results that you're getting, which most likely, correct me if I'm wrong, is probably uplifted mood, trying to fight depression, and a lot of that stuff is based off of our chemistry, right? And what's regulating our chemistry and our, you know, our homeostasis is largely lack of sleep and throwing off that circadian rhythm. So what seems as weird, I mean, to just get out and get sun, like, why is that weird? This should all make sense. Right. I mean, we know we're not necessarily saying get out there butt ass naked and get some anal bleaching in from the sun. That's, you know, I've seen some of that on Instagram as well. But this is just waking up and absorbing some light into the sun for the sake of getting that circadian rhythm back, that clock back.
By the way, that ain't me out there. I've already had a few people send me that video and they're like, Mike, is that you? Homeboy showed his butthole to the sun, recharging. That ain't me, for the record.
Just getting plugged in.
I also think, so my generation is born in America. My parents are the ones that came to America from the Philippines. And I think as I'm aging, I'm also reflecting on cultural misnomers. So in Asian culture, you are at a higher status when you are light skinned. You are at a lower status when you're dark skinned. As in, laborer works on a farm, right? So I always grew up knowing that I'm dark. My mom is very light skinned. And I'm always shielding myself from the sun. And I am now in a place in my life where actually the idea is, no, you need to go out in the sun. So my challenge as a martial artist right now is I do not, and also working through uncomfortable moments, I do not feel comfortable training outdoors. I have to train in a pristine studio that we have complete control of all the time. And especially as a person that has studied AOJ a lot, Do you guys know a guy named Babalu?
No, but I'm watching this
Pride
show
fighter?
I'm watching this show called C,
See,
which
there,
there's a Baba something.
there is a famous Pride and UFC fighter, older generation. His name is Babalu. Him and his wife were my students when I trained in yoga. They have a jiu-jitsu place. They're 13 years strong. So I consulted with Babalu and his wife before we opened the studio. And we told them, like, AOJ is what we're trying to emulate. And he goes, Cidney, it's a bad Brazilian accent. It's like, they spend a lot of money just cleaning. You have to know, are you okay with that? But that was what I feel comfortable with. So that's also why I have a hard time going to your beach workouts.
You get a little sand where it's not supposed to be.
The sand where it's not supposed to be.
Conveniently not responding to those text messages.
Blame it to the sand.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we'll do, man.
So also putting myself in uncomfortable situations, like what you mentioned, is part of helping me.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm doing this, managing a lot of calculated risk. It's easy for me to hang out in a setting like this, but if you were to tell me, Sid, let's go meet at a bar and hang out, or let's go to a mixer, that's hard for me to do because I'm not in control. Yet I know that that's probably the best thing for me. It's like, just say hello to somebody. Yeah.
Well, I would love to dive back a little bit because you're talking about, you jumped into therapy.
Yeah.
And amongst these men, therapy is a regular thing. Right?
Yeah.
Or the acceptance of therapy, being willing to.
Right.
But we're very knowing that most men, especially older generation, kind of that macho kind of therapy. No, I don't need that.
Immigrant mentality.
And I find it really hard for guys to or from what I've seen, men don't want to jump into that.
Yeah.
So where did you find for yourself where you really decided, I'm going to take this step? And also for the people that do listen right now, and they're hearing this and they're inspired by this and they're hearing like, holy shit, wow, like this all makes sense. What would you have to say to them to say don't wait, where were you and where was your mind process going to this is a step I need to take. I just have to do this now.
Yeah, I would say the culture of my yoga students is massive. I have a massive following of students. And they are also attracted to my interpretation of yoga because it is almost the opposite of what they're normally teaching in yoga. But for them to witness me go through a breakup and then be completely fractured was so scary to them that I lost a lot of my students.
Yeah, I'm sure it was jarring.
It was so jarring because it's heavy, bro. It's heavy. And they're still living their lives.
And not only that, they're seeing you and you're here.
Yeah.
And they're just wait.
They look at you. They look at you as the pillar.
Yeah.
Right?
So
you're the solid foundation for them.
One of the big drivers to explore therapy aggressively, and I say aggressively in the sense of your first therapist is not going to be the therapist you land on. Mm-hmm. You're probably going to have to do this rotation of sharing your entire story 3, 4, 5, X amount of times until you get the therapist that you click with.
Good to know.
It's a big deal. That's part of it too, is you got to get out of your head that first person you meet is going to be the one. So in my mindset, I also know that as a guy that is always trying to ultimately serve the greater good, right? As a person of color that owns yoga studios, right? I can't help anybody unless I start putting the pieces together, So that was another component. And probably the biggest driver was the students that were there were basically just having constant mini interventions with me, where it's just they're constantly checking in.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where, to me, it was annoying. Because once I step off stage, once I step off the dojo floor, I need to regroup my energy, you know? But I definitely think it's those students that were basically conducting just these mini interventions with me all the time that helped keep me honest with the therapy, you know? And it also explained it helped me understand a lot of cultural things of having immigrant parents and why I am the way I am, you know? But, you know, yoga is 90% female, and I can definitely say that when I do have male students that I feel get it, I do express to them that at some point therapy is, in any form, is part of your self-work as a man, you know?
When I'm listening to you speak about your story and your perspectives as to how you've gotten to be where you are, you're clearly, right, a leader, proudly a leader, but you have so much self-awareness, and I personally think it's a strength to understand when it's appropriate to lead, but also when it's appropriate to learn and to be a student, right? Can you speak to that as to how you know when to navigate those waters, and also maybe speak to any men who are listening who maybe have some trouble understanding when it's time to sit down and to learn as a student, especially, right, and when to be led, especially when in most cases they're so comfortable being dominant and leading.
Yeah, I definitely think there's almost like two groups. One of them is the entrepreneur group, where we have to be in control, and we're used to being in control, and it has to be done our way. It has to be done chef's way, right? So part of that group has to be like, you cannot scale until you delegate. And when you delegate, you have to have the awareness of it's not going to be done 100% the way you want it. But you need it at the right amount of passable so that the brand can grow, so that the team can feel empowered. Because part of developing a team is allowing them to have that feeling of like, I'm contributing. That's what keeps them loyal, you know? And then there's the other guys, right? But I would say overall, once you start developing the awareness that you can't do everything, you do what you can. I think that's when things start changing. And sometimes sometimes the flag or the signaler might just be you get injured, right? Once you have a physical injury, either you quit or you try to work yourself through it. Even if you're just going back to jiu-jitsu, even if it's like you just sit on the mat and you just watch, you know, or you just walk on the treadmill. I think one of the ways that it is easier for men to understand that they can't control everything, and at some point they have to listen to another voice, is it's energy conservation, right? I mean, but you probably won't hit that level until your mid-30s, where you really understand you've been injured a few times, you've been hurt a few times, things didn't go your way a couple times. You almost have to have this certain amount of life experience to get checked enough where you could ask for help. And I think going back to Jacob again is it kind of seems like we keep coming back to the behavior tool of curating your people, right? Curating your team. In my classes a lot, I talk about like the people that have bad energy, the people that are trolls, obviously pending relatives. You don't have to text them goodbye. You don't even have to check in. Just let it go. And appropriate ghosting out. You have to, at some point, start curating your crew. And obviously in a way where you're not trying to say, like, look, I'm Danny Ocean, everybody else is somebody else, right? Within useful tact. But I think once you start curating your crew, realizing that the team doesn't have to be insanely massive, and we don't got to hang out every single fucking day, but we could have these calculated check-ins, I think is a big behavior tool that can help. And then hopefully that leads into like discussions like, yeah, man, I went to therapy. It went fucking horrible. Like, I'm on my third therapist. Or it's like, dude, my therapist took me to a farm, you know? But also part of this is kind of have to have the general self-awareness when you're younger and you don't have that experience yet, to know that everybody gets checked, you know, everybody gets hurt. I mean, maybe that's when we can say that some people are like old souls, you know? You also can't save everybody, man. That's a big lesson. You cannot save everybody, and sometimes they just kind of got to ride their own path, and you just do what you can. You know, you just got to do what you can. That's part of leadership. You can't save everybody. You got to do what you can, because you still got to protect your energy.
Amen.
You know, like.
Amen.
So yeah, it comes right back again to ability to be aware of curating your crew.
Cidney, I do have a question for you. What is one of the I guess not a significant, what has been like a breakthrough for you that you feel by doing therapy that you feel comfortable sharing on this platform?
I think some of the big breakthroughs in therapy is realizing I don't have all the answers.
You're not a superhero.
I'm not a superhero. I'm just a regular dude. We are animals. We are primal. Like, we cannot feel the best 5 all the time. It's impossible. It's for the most part unnecessary. You know, there are times where you will be in competition or you will train not 100%. You know, I think of developing that awareness of understanding when to go hard, when not to, and somewhere in the middle. I think going back to curating crew again, is that you realize that there are different ones that contribute to the team or to the friendship or to the brotherhood or to the folks.
We all possess different tools.
In different things. And if you're just okay not being an uber alpha, like, I mean, Jocko's a perfect example of the guy, like, everybody knows the dude's the man. But he's really good at just bringing in people. You know, like, the whole thing with Jocko and Theo Vaughn, like, that's a beautiful friendship that those guys have. You know, I think when you start curating the crew and you start developing awareness that everybody has different superhero powers, and part of that might have to mean, like, everybody's got a different idiosyncrasy, and those idiosyncrasies might be rubbing you wrong and stuff like that. But hey, maybe that's just part of being humble or being aware of checking the ego. You know, I think that's why Joe Rogan is so adamant that kids have to learn martial arts, because you have to just deal with that adversity. And probably one of the things that does make, sports is such a big American thing. And I think in whatever realm sports you do, I think that's part of development. Even that part when you do get injured. So one fascinating thing about being a yoga teacher is I used to teach yoga at a rehab center. So there's a men's house and there's a women's house. The men's house, when you start listening to the stories and talking to them, they're all fuck-ups in their own way, and they've all had their bad luck in their own way. And all these guys have demons. Right? But on the female side, it's very interesting. They're all ex-athletes. They're all ex-professionals. And somehow their darkness came when they were injured and they couldn't get back on stage. Or they were just trying substances out that they thought can help them cope or get through. Then that was a very fascinating dichotomy of like, oh wow, these dudes we're all fuck ups, but all these women, it's almost completely uniform. All different sports, all different kind of professions, but it's almost like, yeah, and I think that's why sports is also important. Competition is important. But yeah, going back to your question of what was the big turning point is just realizing like I can't do everything. We can do things like take out the trash, sweep the floor, do that kind of stuff. But there have to be times where we have to like delegate or share tasks, or honestly reach out to somebody, even if you think they're completely fine, Is this too deep?
Not at all.
Scratching the surface. Scratching the surface.
Nah.
Okay.
I do have a question. As you are transitioning kind of right now, or help me understand like how you're feeling about identities and in this particular scenario with you, and where, the past couple of years, you're wearing the hat as like, I'm this entrepreneur, you created Hawt Yoga, I'm busting my ass with this thing. When someone asked you, hey, what do you do? You had something you'd say.
Yeah.
Has that been a challenge for you currently with like, hey, like if you're meeting somebody new, how are you reframing that for yourself?
Yeah.
I asked for personal selfish reasons.
Yeah. There's probably going to have to be different canned answers. And I say canned answers as like a response that you already have preloaded. I mean, I think in generalities, I hope that I'm not being a dick or jerkish by saying I own a studio all the time. I try to say I teach yoga. I think the easiest way, sometimes people will have a misnomer about yoga and they'll think it's religion. So sometimes I'll just say I'm a physical therapist or I'm a therapist. If the conversation seems like something to move forward, then I'll say things like I own a yoga studio or I'm an entrepreneur. Because sometimes your canned answer is something that kind of saves you time.
Yeah.
It provides you an exit to conversation or exit to just move out and engage something else.
Yeah.
There has to be different answers.
Yeah. Like one thing that Antonio does is, he describes himself largely by his kind of characteristics as a person, which I really like, because, these other things that we jump to like, oh, I'm a personal trainer, I own this, I own that, like, becomes very problematic when we hang on to those, because truly that's not who we are. That's what we do, and
What do you mean by that? Can you explain what you mean how Antonio does that?
So a lot of times, I've heard him in the past, like when we're talking about like even like the first episode, for example, we're all hopping in here and we're saying, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. His thing is like, I'm generous. Those types of
statements.
Yeah, exactly.
Courageous, yeah.
Which again, which is like, I'm going through the transition where I'm about to let go of some of these quote unquote titles. And I'm wondering what the fuck I'm going to say when someone asks me, because I could still reach and kind of latch onto this thing that I know is like respected and viewed upon. And that's because a lot of like my values tied up in my doing and what I do. Right. So early in one of our men's group meetings, like I remember, I don't know if it was, I think it was at one of the meetings we were talking about. It was just like, in trying to get right with this scenario, I think I probably even said is like, yes, I've done some pretty cool shit, but if I didn't do those things and I didn't have those things and I was just some dude walking down Sunset Beach, I wouldn't probably be received amongst this group. You know what I mean? So now consciously kind of stripping back some of those titles and those quote unquote accolades that look cool for people.
Yeah.
Am I enough
well,
as who I am?
Right. So I considering that this is a very deep group, I think to some degree, part of managing, whether you call it anxiety or expectation of what do you say when somebody says, what do you do? In my brain, my Curb Your Enthusiasm brain, and how interesting would it be to respond, I'm still working on it. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Work in progress.
I'm still trying to figure it out. And then sometimes their response to me being like real with that kind of shit and be lighthearted, that might dictate, okay, do I want to continue this conversation or not? Because it might be that hot ass Newport chick will be like, okay, I'm out of here. Or it might be that person that's like, oh, tell me more, you know? So yeah, again, now we can say, going back, it's a behavior tool, right? Jacob asked, how do you classify yourself when you are engaged and somebody says, what do you do? Like, hey, that can mean different things, but if it is a point that is causing anxiety, just like, I'm just still working
Cidney,
on it.
let me rephrase that question. Now, what do you do? Who you are?
Yeah.
Who you are. So if anyone would ask that question, who you are, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I would definitely say that I'm a person that loves to share yoga. And I would definitely say the follow-up question would be, not only do I love to share yoga as a form of martial arts, but I believe in it so much that I want to scale it, that I am an entrepreneur because of it. You know, and I also think that the way that you perceive yourself to be has to be fluid. In the sense, it's like, man, I wish I can be killing it like the AOJ guys studio. You know, I wish I could have backing, but that's not where I'm at right now. You know, like, it's good to have these goals, but also not necessarily, you have to manage the fixation and manage the attachment. I mean, again, it goes back to like, dude, we just want to see our team winning, man. We just want to see, somebody's got to fucking make it, you know, like, you know? But yeah, I think that way that you categorize yourself has to be fluid, you know, and to some degree honest, but also use that tool as a way to filter out interactions and conversation.
Yeah. I think thinking about more of who you are versus what you do is like I think a task or a challenge for everybody. You know, all of us, anyone listening, definitely going to spend a little time reflecting on that. And as we kind of approach the hour mark, definitely trying to stay within that. So we'll maybe start with some wrapped up comments and wrap it all up. And, you know, one thing that I want to leave everybody with is that, you know, if you're working on who you are and you're trying to build that foundation of like character and good behavior habits, that when you find yourself in these like tough scenarios where things don't really work out the way you had planned, whether it's in your control or outside of your control, that there's other things to do. So like in my example, from when you first met me and you know, saw me cleaning toilets or doing whatever. I was in this transition period of living down here, having these gyms in Seattle, but down here with no fucking identity. And the people I was running this gym for, complete fucking dicks. But I took the character that was instilled in me through, you know, watching my father or, you know, different models that, you know, I valued, and I cleaned toilets. And no one asked me to do that shit. That's ingrained in me, and that's why I'm going to succeed in the long run, because I got these things that I'm down to do, right? So when you're feeling like, shit, I fucking failed at this business, I did not make it happen, know that you can step into the real world and fucking run the show, because the rest of these motherfuckers ain't doing shit. In your example, the studio fucking, you know, you took some fucking L's. You showed up and you put in the work ethic. You were in there sweeping the fucking dojo every fucking day. Yeah. And now look what happens. You know, you hit this wall. You know, you couldn't push any further. You would have probably if you could, but you couldn't. And now you're teaching at Purple or wherever, and you're fucking selling out the motherfuckers.
Right.
Like,
right. And if I could add one last thing, and maybe this can carry on to the next episode or the meeting, is that the perspective of success, the perspective of winning, the perspective of podium is also something that should be explored. So even though our brick and mortar, a $3 million project went down, for me to be teaching at Purple Yoga, for me to be working on a relationship with Y7, a yoga studio based out of New York, the culture is actually growing. The brand is actually growing. But I have to be aware, to be present enough to understand that there is also a perspective of how am I looking at winning?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
For sure. And you know, I think that's why I'm feeling pretty good about some of the things I'm doing right now.
You should be very proud.
Because the winning for me right now is working on the business of me right now. And it's like, you know, I got a few notches in the belt, and there's a few other character traits that I want to develop. You know, one is delegating. Another thing is, you know, filling up a little bit of the recovery time and like being able to lean into that, you know, read a little bit, learn more intentionally versus like fucking passively, you know, and seeing what I can do with some of those things. So, yeah, dude, really appreciate, you know, you stepping up in here and sharing.
Absolutely.
You know?
Anytime.
Any,
Yeah, thank you, Sid.
any
Thank you
last
for opening and sharing
words
with
from
us.
you fellas? Yeah.
Well, I guess for me, I just want to take something out of Cidney's belt. Instead of looking at what I do, it's who I am. And with the quick one, this is Cutthroat. You guys can find me at Cutthroat Barber. But I'm a man who is selfless and generous, and it's something that I value a lot about myself, and I see in myself, and I can appreciate it about myself. And everyone out there that's listening, take that time. It doesn't got to be a bunch of shit. Just think of one thing that you really value about who you are as a person. Not what you do, but who you are. And really cherish and relish in that, and think about that and value about that about yourself. What about you guys?
Well, further to what you just say, Mike, the importance of the exercise of identify yourself with your being other than your doing. It really relies on the fact that once you do that, once you do identify yourself with your being, there is nothing or no one that can take that away from you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Can't say anything after that. Thank you for being here, man.
My pleasure.
Major takeaway for me is just being self-aware, especially as a leader, understanding when to learn, when to be led, and that makes you strong, makes you more of a comprehensive man. I appreciate you just leaning into discomfort and explaining some of your story with us, man. Big time.
Cidney, where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
No, you should not find me. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, good luck getting into one of his. Good luck getting into one of his classes.
No, the Instagram is Hawt Yoga, HAWT, HAWT.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and for all the folks out there, just if you need to reach out, please reach out. Like I like to say in my classes, when we have something called the snow sequence. It's a meditation. The big line there is you're not as alone as you think you may be. That there's others in the snow as well as me. You're not as alone as you think you may be.
Yeah, that's a good message for sure. Well, all right, fellas. If you guys need to get in touch with me, Cub_Saldana on Instagram. Would love to hear from you. And Woods?
Find me on Instagram at ant_Woods with a Z.
You can find me at Strength Philosopher.
And you can find me over at Cutthroat Barber.
All right, guys, going to wrap up this episode. Appreciate all your guys' time and spending this hour with us. Until next week, we're out of here.
Peace.
Peace.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Warriors Collective. If you like what you heard and this resonated with you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well as the bell so that you get all the alerts and updates of when new episodes come out. You can also find us on all podcast streaming channels, Apple, Spotify, and your other favorite channels as well.